Good morning and welcome. Thanks for joining Texas Housers in a live chat with two distinguished City Council members as we dive into understanding the City of Houston's apartment inspection ordinance. My name is Julia Arduña. Joining us today are City Council member Tiffany Thomas and Mayor Pro Tem Martha Castex-Tatum. Tiffany Thomas serves on Houston City Council as the first woman to represent the diverse community of Alief, West Chase, the historic Piney Point, and Tanglewild in District F. As chair of the Housing and Affordability Committee, she has been a fierce advocate for residents, mobilizing millions in disaster recovery relief for homeowners and renters alike. And now she's bringing the same advocacy to apartment reform citywide. When she isn't leading major reforms at City Hall, she is continuing to research, connecting research to action as an associate professor of community development at Prairie View A&M University. She is a member of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Inc., the National Society Action Chair for the Links Incorporated, and the 2025 Local Elected Unum Fellow, and a leader of the America Housing Comeback Task Force with the National League of Cities. Martha Castex-Tatum serves as Houston's Mayor Pro Tem and District K City Council member, where she is focused on improving public safety, infrastructure, and access to resources. She leads the city's Economic Development Committee and serves in several others, working to create opportunities and improve quality of life for all Houstonians. On the national stage, she was elected to the National League of City Boards and now chairs its 2025 Technology and Communications Committee. Castex-Tatum believes in restoring trust in government through responsive leadership and genuine community engagement. She is a proud mom, graduate of Texas State University, and an active member of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Inc. and the Link Inc. Welcome for being here. Thanks.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. So let's jump into the ordinance. Mayor Pro Tem, can you tell us a little bit about the purpose of the ordinance and what's been happening in the city right now?
So the reason we are moving towards implementing an apartment inspection ordinance is because like so many cities that allow for public session, we constantly are hearing from tenants that they are concerned about the conditions that some of these landlords have, ushered in the properties that they own. And when you are constantly hearing from residents that they need help, we have to do something. So that's why this apartment inspection ordinance began. It was important for us to look holistically at the inspection ordinance. So we are wanting to talk to not only those tenants, but also the property owners and the landlords so that we can come up with something for the city of Houston that is comprehensive and meaningful.
Thank you. And Councilmember Thomas, why is an ordinance important to the city of Houston, and why is this ordinance so important right now?
No, sure. First, thank you, Julia. And I just want to thank the Texas Housers for being a part of the entire process. I can't tell you how important it is to have stakeholders at the table helping us co-create what the final product will be. So I want to just publicly appreciate you and everyone who participated. So the ordinance, this is our guiding principle, right? Like we have to have ordinance on the books in order to keep us accountable and then set a standard for the residents, right? When we walk into City Hall and it says the people are the city. And so we have to keep that in mind. And so right now, the city of Houston, I like to say we operate off of practice and oftentimes not policy. And so this is an opportunity for us to have policy at the table so we can give good direction to residents. They know what to expect. And then our operators and our landlords, they know what we are requiring and expecting of them to reinforce our commitment to quality housing.
Definitely. And so the mayor has tasked both of you all with the city engagement of listening to the public, as you said, and hearing the needs of the apartment conditions and the landlords and how to achieve this safe and sanitary improvement. So how are you all expecting this engagement to support what you've been doing?
So we have held 2 community meetings We kind of split those up for districts, but everyone was welcome to attend either of those actual community meetings, because we want to hear from the public. We are expecting to utilize the feedback that we have gleaned and garnered from those participants to help us shape this policy. Whenever we are looking to create public policy, it's important that we do all that we can to hear from the public. Most times when we create ordinances or something is happening at City Hall, one of the biggest concerns we hear from residents and stakeholders is, I didn't have a chance to express my concerns.
Right.
So we wanted to make sure that we had a comprehensive plan and that we gave residents, Houstonians, landlords, property owners, every stakeholder an opportunity to participate, share their feedback, and help us shape this actual policy. So there have been 2 community meetings. We'll have a joint committee meeting. I know we'll talk about that a little later, but we'll have a joint committee meeting, and residents can still send their communication, their feedback, their questions to us electronically. We're still accepting feedback, and we still want to hear from community members. If they're just hearing about it, it's not too late. We want you to be able to help us shape this policy.
Right. And if I can add there, we heard a lot, and I really appreciate everyone who not only attended in person, but we live streamed this through HTV on all of the platforms. We had hundreds of viewers tune in so they can stay online with translation services, which was critically important when we look at 57%, a large percentage of Houstonians have leases, right? And some of the things, new information that I learned, and Mayor Pro Tem's absolutely correct. This is not a new issue, right? We consistently hear tenants, leaseholders come to public session, but we also hear from property owners that come to session asking for particular support from the city on how they can keep their properties secure. If there's public safety issues, because we do have landlords that are just as invested in quality housing as well. And we have tenants that have oftentimes gotten the short end of the stick. So we learned a lot about mold, and that the city of Houston does not have mold inspectors. We heard several recommendations around hearing from 311 being really responsive, and oftentimes property management only responding once 311 was involved. So that's all good intel as we look to enhance the ASEC, the team of representation of representatives from those city departments. All this is good information, so we fine tune the ordinance before we get there. Mayor Pro Tem's right. Every week we vote at City Hall, and I think people fail to realize how fast the city moves. Every Wednesday at 9 a.m., there is a new agenda. And oftentimes, we get the feedback on the back end, or you have, 24 hours, 48 hours to contribute to an agenda item. And most community members don't have the space to get their bearings together to even come down there on a Tuesday. So we are reverse engineering that process, doing community engagement on the front end, building it up. So when we get to special call, with the joint committee meeting, the departments will have the feedback incorporated in what's presented to the public.
Thank you. And we appreciate everything that you all have done, as you've both mentioned, public engagement and listening to the community, the tenants and the landlords is so important. So thank you for continuing to take this on and lead us into something that is going to benefit our city. So let's dive into what this ordinance is. As we see on the screen, there's a little bit of information about the ordinance. This is Chapter 10 of our Houston City Code, that is our Building and Neighborhoods Protection, and particularly Article 4, which talks about the multifamily habitability code. Do you all have anything you want to highlight particularly about the ordinance, or any key features that this new language is intending to create?
Yeah, I just want to say that this isn't a cure-all, and I think we have to be careful with, we have an ordinance on the books. This is a targeted to our top high-risk properties. And Mayor Pro Tem led the discussion with our operators and landlords, and there was some feedback around that came up. And since I was with the leaseholders with you, So this is not, and not to say that we're not addressing other properties, but when we're looking at our high risk, our top 20 in the city that have structural challenges, sewage is backing up, they need to, the roof, there's a hole in the roof from this damage that has not been repaired. We are looking at that type of triage work to address that through this ordinance, and then also how we address all properties moving forward. But our top priority is the high risk. What came from some of the feedback that we presented to the departments to incorporate was making sure we're clear on the definition of what we're defining as high risk, right? Because everyone, depending on where you're living, if it's mold infested, if it's a public safety issue, if the elevator's not working, it's a high risk to all of us. So we're level setting with making sure definitions, everyone's very clear about what that expectation is in the ordinance so they can move forward in addressing the repairs, and then we can move forward in setting an expectation for residents.
And I like that we're talking about setting the expectations, because we will definitely need help from organizations like Texas Housers, because I know when the headlines read City of Houston passed apartment inspection ordinance, people are going to immediately expect that their apartment issues are going to go away. And we need to make sure that we are setting realistic expectations. I think this is a wonderful opportunity for us to really pounce on tenant education and how to actually communicate with your landlord, because quite frankly, your lease is a agreement between a tenant and a landlord, and the cities definitely have responsibilities, but this is a great opportunity for us to make sure we are educating tenants and property owners on best practices, and that we are encouraging tenants to document, and we are encouraging them to report their concerns to 311, and we are encouraging our tenants to communicate with their landlord according to their lease. So
Right.
Not only are we wanting to protect the public, but we also want to make sure we are educating the public and not setting unrealistic expectations about what this actual ordinance will do.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so we talked a little bit about the high risk inspection program and what this is attempting to do. Can you all describe that a little bit? I know it's not entirely fleshed out, and this is the initiation of this, but for the folks listening, what would that ultimately create?
Well, we have data, we have data from Public Works and from HPD, right? When we're looking at the properties that receive either the highest calls for service due to issues on property and or habitability calls in the city. So that we already know that exists. I think initially the administration was comfortable starting in the pilot around 11 to 13 properties. We're moving them to launch to about 20 to 25 because we know certain districts have higher concentrations of multifamily. So we're working through that so we can have something a little bit more meaningful. High risk based on that data alone gives us our starting point. Typically it's structural issues, sewage issues, things that are egregious over time, where quality of life is truly interrupted. I've had personal experience, and I'm sure Mayor Pro Tem and our other council colleagues as well. I've been on property where sewage backup has taken over the entire neighborhood. And matter of fact, they didn't even call 311. They sent it to Grizzy News first. That's how I found out about it, right? And that's how we were notified, was able to escalate this and get this to the health department and to Public Works. And then from that, we identified a series of other issues. That takes a long time when you look at the drainage problems that they had, and those drainage problems were on private property, right? So what we are looking to do is to tackle those top 20 properties, give the department some teeth to do that. And what came up in some of the conversations, a realization for me, was that when we get to the budget table, we need to make sure that these departments have the personnel and the funding in place in order to get this done. Because Mayor Pro Tem is right. Once the headline hits, the expectation is set that this is on the books. But if we're not supporting it through people and funding, then we'll have to answer to why are we not enforcing the ordinance on the book.
Yes, and right now, as y'all were also talking about education for tenants, or tenants knowing their rights and what
Yep.
is needed to do on their side, their responsibility in the contract, and the landlord's responsibility in the contract. I see portions on the ordinance talk about tenant advocacy or
Yep.
an online report.
Yep.
Where can, and like you just said, sometimes the appropriate way for inspections to start is through that 311 channel, but sometimes we hear it on the media.
Sure.
Sometimes they call y'all's offices directly as your
Sure.
city council member.
Sure.
So that education part for tenants, for that transparency, is there something else that y'all would like to highlight or talk about in that regard for tenants and possibly for landlords as well?
I think it's important for us to really stress to the public is that our goal is compliance.
Yeah.
We need the tenants to let us know what's happening, and then we need the property owners to know what our expectations for habitability actually pertains to, so that we can have compliance. And this is what I heard that was most impactful in the meetings with the property owners, is that our inspectors are looking for them to make sure that they are operating as expediently as they can to resolve these issues. And we want to make sure that we are moving, and our goal is compliance. So if a tenant is reporting a drainage issue or even a mold issue, I wanted to touch on that, Councilmember Thomas, because it did come out that the city of Houston does not have mold inspectors. However, because we don't have mold inspectors, it's even more imperative that tenants are reporting ventilation issues or drainage issue, water penetration issues that actually lead to mold that could be considered hazardous, because we can make sure that we are enforcing compliance and making sure they are repairing those issues as soon as possible to prevent the mold. And then we need our tenants to make sure that they are asking for mold remediation and taking pictures and documenting, so that they do have a body of data that we can use as we are also enforcing our city ordinance. So it's education and making sure people know what we can and cannot do and who they need to report this to. And I will tell you, people need to know who to call as their council member. I remember, and I say this all the time, when I was running for the special election in District K, and I was walking around the city and I was saying, what district do you live in? Who's your council member? So many residents do not know. And this is an opportunity for us to meet people where they are. This is your council member's number. At a minimum, you should be receiving your council member's newsletter. You should know who is the chief of staff for the person that represents you. How can I get in touch with them? So after you call 311 and get that service request number, I would immediately turn around and call my council office so that they can also push and advocate for you and try to get compliance and a resolve for our tenants in the city of Houston.
Absolutely.
That's right. Do y'all want to talk a little more about other feedback that you heard either from the tenants or the property owners during these meetings?
Yeah, what was interesting when we're talking about the high risk properties, that there was definitely a recommendation around pre-inspection, and I never thought about that. Pre-inspection is not, we already have precedent for pre-inspection from the federal rule guideline when we look at our Houston neighbors that benefit from housing subsidy from the house, through a voucher, a Section 8 voucher. There's pre-inspection to those units. There are federal rules already in place, right? That before those families move in, that there's an inspection. And I think because that precedent from a federal level already exists, it makes sense. And hopefully there's a capacity opportunity we can address to do that. For example, if we're at the high risk property and there's 10 units that have been reported and 10 units that are on the list, and this is one of the recommendations that came up, before any new lease is placed on that unit, before a family moves back in, there should be a pre-inspection from Public Works or the health department to make sure that the issues that were checked off, that they're actually done and met to standards. And then it gets us out of the reactionary, right? We're doing things on the back end and we're expending resources that are already limited. But if we had a more proactive approach to that for our high risk, we might be able to cover more ground. And then tenants, leaseholders would know that this unit has been checked off. It's a green light, right? And we already do that from a federal perspective. That was something that was a real light bulb to me and goes back to the point of personnel and funding.
One of the things that came out with the property owners that was eye-opening to me is several of the property managers and operators were very concerned that when citations were given, that they were actually issued the citations. And we want to make sure that when these apartments get their certificate of occupancy, a lot of these apartment complexes are owned by LLCs, or they are not listed in individual names. And so when we do have concerns or inspectors are on those properties, the person maintaining the property or managing the property is actually issued the citation. So we want to make sure that these property owners are willing to share the contact of the owner, the person that is ultimately responsible, because we know they are carrying out the duties of the property owner, but should they actually be the person cited? Because making sure that we have that contact information is going to be extremely vital for us as we move towards compliance and making sure that the property owners are doing their very best to mitigate any of these habitability issues that so many Houstonians may consider concerning.
Yeah, and if I can add there, we district up on the west side, we have a high concentration, like the second largest concentration of multifamily in the city. District B on the north side, high concentration as well, and then all throughout, right? And what I've learned just in serving on the west side is that we have a lot of owners that are not in Texas. They're not even in the area. And so it's hard to track down to get them. Many of them, when we are looking up who owns the property, it's an LLC, it's third party. We can't really access, which creates delay, right? In terms of enforcement, we're trying to work on something with an encampment now because of that. So I believe we need to do a little bit more legwork with the departments, but I think that also should be communicated as well. I have examples of landlords that are actively on that property. I have landlords that actually live on property. So they are in the mix, right? This is where they live. They are in the mix, and they are very supportive, and they work with us and their tenants because they live here too, right? Their kids go to the schools, they go to the same stores, they drive the same streets. It is a problem when folks are out the area. There's multiple owners and we can't put our hands on them for enforcement. And so then it looks as if there's no activity on the city side when really we're trying to deploy resources to track them down and get them to respond to the initial citation. So my hope is that the ASEC team, or however we can support that, will have that information as well. Because I do think leaseholders should know, right? Like the general public should know, not just our high risk properties, but the habitual bad actors, like who are they? And, what do we really need to do to address enforceability of this ordinance? Because I don't want the fines to be cost of business, like so many other ordinances are, like, oh, I'll pay the money and it's fine. We want this to have teeth, but we also want to give our operators the time to get this done, because every elevator chute is not the same. Every drainage project is not the same. And we don't want rush crap jobs, because we've seen that, and our residents are still in dire conditions. And so some of those, balancing the need for property owners to actually do this the right way and get it right, meet our standard, while also meeting the need of making sure Houstonians are in quality housing.
I like that, Councilmember Thomas, and I think that we really have to be cognizant of how our world has changed too. We have a lot of C and D property on ground that have been there since the 60s and 70s. Yep. that don't have generators, that never thought they would need generators for these elevators, especially in our apartment complexes for our seniors. So now that as we are building new apartment complexes, these are conversations that we are having to make sure that we are making the adjustments for the weather concerns that we have, because all of that plays a part in habitability, making sure that these apartment complexes are meeting our current needs. And how do we get those older properties up to code or up to speed so that when folks are still living in those properties, that they also are living in safe conditions. And I'm going to put a plug in right here. If there are some developers and apartment owners out there that are looking to do some work with our apartment complexes, we want rehabs. We are looking for rehabs in the city of Houston. We want folks to be able to live in new properties, but we also want some of the older properties to be made new so that folks can live in better quality apartment complexes throughout the city of Houston.
Absolutely. And we just talked about 6 of those rehab properties at the Housing Committee yesterday. So an active effort to make sure that we move these through council and hopefully in the future with some funding. But, she's absolutely right. Let's just talk about the climate, right? So if we're in a city with 8 to 11, 9 federally declared disasters, Hurricane Beryl, many folks were out of power for 11 days. If there was damage to their home, water, the elements got in, they're going to have mold. I had mold after Harvey, right? From water leaks in my own house. And so I think we have to look at the nature of the environment we live in and how much of our housing inventory is beat up by climate. So we have to move expeditiously in order to address this, knowing that we are much more susceptible to mold and those type of structural damages.
Yeah, and while that might be a entirely separate ordinance looking at building codes and fortified and things like that, this is definitely step one. How do we support the conditions right now while we work towards improving our building? I want to touch on a couple of things, and in particular also questions that have come in from our community members. One question asks, could more representatives of a property be available on site? And I think this speaks a little bit to the setting expectations, as you all were speaking at the beginning, knowing that these properties are private businesses. So the city can't control who lives on the property if they have maintenance people living on the property. What they can control is the enforcement of conditions. So I don't know if you all have anything else to add to that question as far
I would encourage tenants, and when you are moving into a property, if that's a big concern for you, to try to ask that up front. How is the maintenance taken care of in these properties? And that goes back to, we have to continue and never grow tired of educating folks that are moving into apartment complexes in our city. With over 50% of folks in a lease, we have to make sure they know the questions to ask. And this could definitely be on a checklist. This is important to tenants. Let's get a checklist together. So when you are moving into a property, these are questions that you can ask of the property owners or the landlord to make sure this is going to be a good fit for you and your family.
Absolutely.
I love that idea of a checklist. And I know that tenants are given a conditions checklist before they come in, but maybe there's a question checklist of other considerations you should ask. Like, a lot of people don't know there's additional fees like pet fees or junk fees, the trash fees, all those things that add up, that when you're just thinking about rent, you don't think of anything else that may come with it. So asking those questions. Another question that we have from our community is, how do you enforce the ordinance? We were talking about fines, but are there additional levels to enforcement that this ordinance is bringing into the fold?
Well, we're still working through all of that. I mean, we want to make sure that the fine is substantive enough that it's not considered just doing business as an owner, a cost of doing business, and we'll have an opportunity to fine each day. I think that holds a heftier weight when you are receiving a fine daily, as opposed to just one individual fine. But again, our ultimate goal is compliance. And so we want to make sure that we are pushing these property owners to repair what is being asked to and needed to be repaired. And, it's going to take doing it for us to kind of fine tune the data, what worked, what didn't work. And I mean, I think if I was a property owner and I was on this list of 20, I would try to get myself together, because you'll be on a website. I mean, people will have access to the fact that you are, not hosting a habitable place, and that's not good press for a property owner and for profitability as a business owner. So hopefully you won't want to be on this list, and you'll do everything that you can to come into compliance and move off of this actual list that has been, curated because of the ordinance.
Yeah, and to add to that, hopefully the item, we can get it to where it comes back every year, just so we could pulse check, right? We could hear from giving the departments a chance to actually strike and go through the process, so we can. And I think with policy, we have to consistently bring it before us, right? There's things on the books that, worked 20 years ago. Maybe we need to put our eyes on it again. And so we'll be able to do that hopefully every year, just to make sure that the guidelines in place. Do we need to alter that? Does the fee schedule need to change? Did we learn something new about enforcement? Is there something else that they have learned on the field, on the street about this, and how we communicate to tenants? I think that's always on the table. And so the way I envision this is that this is an ordinance that will move forward affirmatively, but that it's still a living document. It's still living, because we're actively working through it to bring it back to the people, to bring it back to tenants, back to property owners, in order to make sure that we perfect this over time, because we don't live the way we lived 30 years ago. Though some of those properties need to be taken over.
Yeah, and we know climate is changing. It's getting hotter, it's getting colder, it's getting wetter. So got to make sure that we're accounting for all those things and supporting our properties and supporting our tenants.
Sure.
So for the ordinance, we've been doing the public engagement. What type of information, suggestions would you like people to submit? I know even in some of these questions, we've gotten some suggestions of what could or should be done. What type of suggestions would you all like to see come from the public?
Well, I mean, if you're a leaseholder, from my perspective, I'm interested if you're living in these conditions currently, right? Us pulling data on 311 and internally is one thing, but a lot of times you'll be surprised how a lot of people don't call 311, and they are experiencing issues where we could have interrupted that. So if you are currently living with those types of in those conditions, please let us know. I mean, you can see this on any news channel at any time. There's some type of story about poor living conditions, but let's raise that issue so it can better inform that the ordinance. From my perspective, I'm really interested in the mold piece, and I'm interested in the definition of the high risk and where we settle. The city and the county, we're going through this comprehensive housing plan, and I think this is interconnected in the sense of, when we're looking at repairs and keeping people housed, I want to make sure that repairs don't become punitive for the leaseholders. So because the landlord has to spend all this money to finally fix the property, that now, they're going to skyrocket their rent, or they're going to add these additional assessments. So one of the things that came from the discussion was if there's a pause on increasing rent during the time of significant repairs, right? So if you are on a high risk property and we've deemed this, that you'd have this type of time to get this done, you cannot increase the rent until this is complete. So people are not overextended financially while living in a property that may not meet the intention of the contract. And so if you're experiencing that, if you are a property owner, if you are a landlord and operator, we want to hear your feedback. because we know the good ones show up, right? The good ones who are invested, they show up to the meetings, they want to contribute, they want to, make sure that this makes sense. And one of the things that I was reading the notes, it said, like we do have leaseholders that tear up apartments as well. We have, they leave these units in disarray, and it is costly to that, and they can't move the next family in. And some of the operators are asking, well, what about that? Like, what's the enforcement on that end? Because that takes another unit of housing off the line until they can get that cleared up. And so we need to hear all of those perspectives so we can make sure that we balance this out. Because if you imagine tearing up, and some of this is related to squatting, right? And then that's something that we have to address, that's separate, and they damage these units. We deal with that often. We can't put families in there. We can't have a lease on there. So people are without housing. And I think that's something that we have to address long term that may not be addressed in this ordinance.
Yeah, I'm really looking to hear some of those really good success stories too. I think we hear a lot of the bad things that happen and the bad conditions. I do think it's just as important for us to hear some of those good best practices that our property owners and property managers have seen that have actually worked on their properties. They have some ideas of something. They had an issue that was concerning to their tenants, and they tried something and it worked. We want to know about it because maybe we can share that with other property owners. How can we also amplify the good property owners, the good property landlords that are doing it right for Houstonians? And again, it goes back to that education piece too, because a lot of the property managers and the owners also want to make sure that we are holding our tenants accountable. They have some, requirements for living in their properties, and sometimes tenants don't abide by it, and it costs them additional dollars. So there are some success stories out there. We want to amplify those so that people know that there are some good tenant landlord relationships out there in these properties, and we can continue to model that.
For sure.
Definitely. We definitely want to highlight the good landlords. And that's what the purpose of this is, to kind of siphon into who are the ones that need a little more assistance, and not to say there are all bad landlords or that they're meaningfully, sometimes they just, the struggle of our climate and getting those repairs done is hard. So education on the tenants of their responsibilities and their rights, and maybe education for the landlords on financial feasibility and how to support their property as well. So I think that's great. There is another question that came in asking about creating a database about properties and meet the standard. And I do believe that that's written in the ordinance. So whoever suggested that, please submit your comments if you have more thoughts on what might come into this database, what information should be there, reflected, and what should be captured. So please, that's a great suggestion. So as we get into thinking about our next steps, can you all talk about what is next for the ordinance? Where are we getting to from today, the 19th, and then what comes next?
So we've got a joint committee meeting on March the 30th at 2 p.m. It'll be held here in the City Hall chambers. It's a joint meeting of economic development and, of course, the housing and affordability committee. So residents still have another opportunity to share their concerns, their feedback. We want to hear from everyone. This will be an opportunity for the entire city council to come together and ask their questions once they see the presentation and all of the feedback that we've collected during our 2 committee meetings and, of course, our live stream. So our colleagues can dive into what we are looking at moving forward for the city of Houston and add any additional input that they may have as well. And then we'll have 30 days or so from then to get it on the actual agenda for a vote by the entire council.
Yeah. And I doubt it'll take 30 days to do that. I think the heart of the matter, we're addressing that. We're dedicating city resources, personnel to this. We've had broad, very meaningful engagement, which I think should be a model for substantial ordinances like this. We should lead with the engagement before the ordinance gets to the agenda. It is a heavy lift and takes a lot of labor, but we appreciate partners and stakeholders like Texas Housers who are able, and the Apartment Association, other coalitions, super neighborhoods and civic clubs that participated in and joined with us to get this the most balanced, meaningful ordinance. And so, yeah, we, reach out to your council member, and most of our colleagues grapple with the same issues, particularly district members. They know their problem complexes just like anyone else. And so raise the issue to your district member if you don't know your district member, but also reach out to all of the at-large members as well. We all sit on various committees. Quality of life, housing, economic development, all of this is intertwined. And so, this is an opportunity for you to participate in your public policy. And so hopefully this could be an ordinance where we're all in the chambers cheering, because sometimes, we've been in the chambers and it's been pretty tense. And I think this will be a moment where we'll cheer for the people of Houston, and we can move forward and hopefully see some successes from the ordinance.
Any last thoughts before we close out today?
Just want to let folks know that we're still accepting feedback. We want to hear from you. If you know of people that are living in apartment complexes that have not been engaged, that want to engage, we anticipate, hearing from you at our next meeting or via email. We want to get this information out to every single person that may have a stake in these apartment complexes and what's happening with this ordinance. So feel free to reach out to your elected officials, and let's make something comprehensive, something that is meaningful and impactful for the entire city of Houston, so that we can be a model in housing and affordability and habitability, not only for the city of Houston, but for cities across the country.
Yep.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us today and giving us your time and spending your morning with us. We will see you then on March 30th in Chambers.
Yes, you will. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you. Y'all have a great day.
You too. And so, as our city council members have said and suggested, that there is an opportunity for you to get involved. If you'd like to submit comments, if you have thoughts or suggestions to the ordinance, you can submit them to District F, District K. Like our city councilor suggested, your city council member also wants to hear from you and needs to understand what you're going through. And the council members at large also represent you. So feel free to email them. You can find their information in the links below that we are adding. Who is your city council member and how to communicate with them. You can also find the language for the ordinance in the committee, the Economic Development Committee. So find that link in our comments as well. That will be coming up, and stay tuned for more information on that. You can sign up to speak on March 30th. That link is also in our comments. So please click on those links, get informed, get involved, and hopefully we will see you March 30th at 2 p.m. at City Hall. Thanks for joining us today. And if you have any other questions, if you'd like to get in touch with Texas Housers or any of the city councilors, Mayor Pro Tem, please do so. Get involved, because it is your right, it is your city, and we can all make it better. So thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time.